Ndaga. Acha.
Hello, Legos Trumpeters Conference 2025. My name is Sigauque, otherwise born as Daniel Walter. I'm now 23 years, almost 23 years, Johannesburg, Maputo, Mozambique. Very happy to be here. It has been quite some time since I've spoken or done a lecture in English, as my usual work language is Portuguese, so I'll be getting used to my mother tongue. I would also like to say that this is the first time I've filmed myself like this, so while I might say this is take one, this is certainly not take one. Thank you to Victor Ademo, a very good friend of mine, for inviting me and putting this conference together. Saxophone Hub, Afro Odyssey and Afro 4, somebody's chipping in, and Afro 4 for putting this together. This is such a fantastic opportunity for all of us brass family to come together. Have you ever met a brass player you didn't like? I don't think so, because it doesn't matter what walk of life we all come from, and we do come from different walks of life. There are the Christians, there are the military, there are the jazzies, there's the jazz. Brass, we encompass just about every type of lifestyle and every type of life. Yet we're all family. I would say brothers, but we are sisters as well. So we're all family in our love of brass, and I think that is something really beautiful. I've met some people that I would never normally call friends and become close, just because we all understand how difficult that bloody instrument is to get anywhere near good at. So brass has not always been universal in Africa. As we know, quick history of brass. Brass came to Africa back in the late 1800s with churches and military bands. Brass had its heyday in especially West Africa. Back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, from big band to some of the all the way to Afrobeat, basically, and everything in between. Brass died out greatly when I was in Ghana 20 odd years ago. Brass had pretty much died a death. So a lot of the studying that I was doing in Ghana at the time, I was learning about all this beautiful brass, and I hadn't played brass at that point in my life. So I was studying all this beautiful brass, and I was thinking, well, this is a crime. There was not one brass player in Accra, Ghana, that I knew of, and I certainly think I did learn a heck of a lot about Accra. I would say there would not have been one brass player in Accra at the time. So as compared to now, where I was just talking to my wife the other day about the first time I went to Kenya for work. I always bring my trumpet in my bag, get my first weekend where I've got a Saturday night, and where can I go play? Find some cats to go and play with. Ended up sitting in a hotel lobby with a guy on a little Casio keyboard, and that was all. The next year I went back. I met one horn player. He introduced me to two others. The next year I went back, there was full bands. Next year I went back, they were better than me by a lot. I mean, they were playing giant steps. I still can't play giant steps. So the speed at which this brass culture has grown is just mind-boggling. And that's why I say that in all of the history of brass in Africa, you could not have always said that brass is an African universal. It is now. And the nice thing is, I think it always will be. I think that if you look at the film industry, we are now living in the Netflix generation. Now, Netflix is not like the old MGM and then Paramount and Universal Studios, Warner Brothers, where they would have their own orchestras, hiring their entire brass sections, No, nowadays, music that is done, and film is just one example, but music that is done for film is done everything is done digitally. Everything is done with patches and with certain programs, except for brass. Brass players are still called in to do Netflix style movies. Brass musicians are still called in and paid to play, and that's because. And now with AI coming, I have not yet heard, but I don't think AI can come up with anything that can replace the sound of brass, because we're so unique and we're so different, and our instrument makes a sound that is unique onto itself. So that fills me with a lot of the fact that we're growing in numbers, and the fact that you can't really, like I say, they don't go catch us. They no go catch us. I'm telling you, no way. Brass is here to stay, and what I'm here to talk about is some of my personal insights and my personal experience in using brass. Obviously, since I've become a brass player, I try to incorporate brass into most of my music, but also the ability that I've had. Like I said, I worked in Kenya. I've had the experience to bring a lot of different musical styles together. I'll get into that a little bit later, but basically saying that Africa has got thousands of different rhythmic styles, thousands of different ways of singing and playing, that we don't necessarily know what the other guy's doing. If I'm in Luanda and I'm playing samba, not samba, Angolan the music is called samba. If I'm playing samba or kizomba and then I run to Ghana, they've got no idea. If I ask an Angolan if he knows about high life, they've got no idea. If I ask a Kenyan if he knows about mbalach, they've got no idea. So one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this is because I've recorded and produced in many of these countries and done a lot of research in many of these countries. And I think I'm trying to inspire people to look to the other side of the fence and see the little bits and pieces that they can take from other African experiences. Because the traditions are vast. I think we're sitting on top of a gold mine, and I think as far as getting into, as far as creating new genres and new styles, I think we haven't even scratched the surface. Well, for the last 23 years, my wife and I have been running a company called Community Media for Development Productions. We are based in, of course, Johannesburg and Maputo. We work mostly in social and behavior change communications. So this has brought us to many countries in Africa, producing everything from radio dramas to doing trainings on journalism to music for social change, all sorts of facets to our company. We work, of course, in children's rights, disaster risk and reduction, which involves a lot of work in climate change. We work in migrancy, health issues, and xenophobia. Xenophobia, quickly, from a xenophobia album that I produced years ago, that the name Sigauque came. A neighbor happened to say, "Hey, Sigauque, would you bring me that Sigauque CD?" Even though Sigauque was only one of 5 songs that we had produced. So that's why the name stuck. And when I found it handy with the police, I kept it. As would anybody in Africa. No, it became a lot more than that. I'm very proud of the name Sigauque. So when I was, I believe, 8, maybe 9 years old, under the Christmas tree, my parents bought, in the old days, do I look that old? In the old days, we used to buy cheap cassette tapes at a big bargain bin. I think they would be $1 or $1.99 each. Well, my parents bought me 5 cassettes. They were under the Christmas tree. I believe I was 8, maybe 9 years old. One of them was Mozart. One of them was Johnny Clegg. One of them was Wynton Marsalis, J-Mood, which is a rather obscure cassette, which is why it was in the bargain bin. And one of them was Hugh Masekela playing with Hedzoli Sounds in Accra, Ghana. Again, a very rare cassette. Many people haven't heard it. It's Hugh's early work, Hugo as we call him in Mozambique. And of course, Billy Joel, Songs in the Attic. So if you look at my life and you look at my history and what I managed to do, and you look at those 4 or 5 cassettes way back underneath the Christmas tree that cost my parents all of about $10, that really set my life in motion. Later that summer, my father borrowed a farmer's truck to come and bring an old 100-year-old piano which had no ivory on the keys, and he sat there on the truck before the neighbors could come and bring it in the house playing chopsticks. So that's kind of the beginning of music for me. Now, from then, of course, I went on to study. I went to the National Arts School. I studied opera music. I went on to study under Ingemar Korius, which is a famous opera singer. So basically, opera, piano, and voice and piano were basically, and of course, music theory were basically my instruments in the early days. Then I graduated high school, and my grandmother left me a bit of money, so I went to Europe on a bicycle. I rode across Western Europe, and I got down to Africa, and I rode across West Africa on a bicycle. Now, back then, I didn't know anything about African music. I knew that I really liked Johnny Clegg, and I knew that I really liked not so much Hugh Masekela, but the Hedzoli Sounds, the backup band was I could hear something was cool in there that I really liked. Went to Gambia, and I was shocked, expecting to find African traditional music. So what did I find? I was in a very small village called Lamine, which is just outside of not far from Brikama. Brikama, of course, is the home of Alhaji Baikonte, the famous kora player. So there I was in Lamine, and my friend took me out to this show, and it was a Western band. It had a bass guitar, it had an electric guitar, it had a PA system, it had a set of Western drums. And I went, well, wait a minute. I thought I was coming to a part of Africa where it was African. And wow, can you imagine from then until now the change in just who I am? It's amazing when we don't know anything, how fascinating the world can be. So I came home from that trip, all excited about. So I went back to the bargain bin, and I was searching for every piece of African music I could. I went back to college, started a radio program on the college station, and here I was with my classical musician formal training, trying to explain kora pieces in a very classical dictionary, and I was completely lost. My programs were absolutely terrible. It wasn't really until I got to Ghana in 1999 and started studying under John Collins that I got a real grasp of the history. Why was there that drum kit there? It didn't just arrive yesterday, as we all know. The history of popular music in West Africa goes back, arguably 1880s, right? Based on 2 rhythms, 2 Ghanaian rhythms. Now, you Nigerians, most Nigerians agree with this. I do have the odd person that doesn't. That's why you can make your comments. Anyway, Agbaja and Adowa are the roots of, first of all, palm wine music that came directly from the 2-finger picking that the cruise sailors, that became soukous, that became high life, that became Afrobeat, that became blues. That same two-finger picking style that the cruise sailors incorporated in, and that the Ghanaians incorporated into palm wine music, became every type of music, or the offroots of every type of music that we know today, from rumba, samba, Afro-Cuban, you name it. So what I'm trying to make a case for is that there are so many other opportunities than just, hammering out on these 2 rhythms. And I'm talking about Western popular music. I'm talking about the jazzes and the rumbas and these types of. I'm talking about using Africa as a hotspot of traditional rhythms. Here's another example. If I go to Luanda in Angola and I tell somebody about Mbalach in Senegal, they're not going to know what I'm talking about. If I tell somebody in Kenya, I don't know, Ghanaian high life, for example, they will probably not know what I'm talking about. And now imagine if musicians had a sense of what the left hand knowing what the right hand is doing. Imagine what would come out of that. So that's basically where I'm going with this. My life then took me to Ghana, where I started working very closely with Professor John Collins. Not only was I going to a lot of his lectures, but I was also working a lot with BAPMAF. I had a photography studio and a recording studio at my place, so I would go through hours of old shellac records, digitize some of the old photographs, do corrections, this type of thing. So I had a lot of time that I spent with John, both at his lectures and doing this type of thing. When I left Ghana in 2002 and I came to South Africa to work again in radio and communications, he gave me the title of BAPMAF representative, BAPMAF Popular Music Archives representative for Southern Africa. So therefore, I came to Southern Africa. My very first position was lecturing at several universities here in Cape Town, Grahamstown, and other places. Okay, so remember what I said about an Angolan and a Senegalese and a Kenyan and a South African and a Ghanaian and a Nigerian, and how oftentimes they don't cross very often when it comes to musical culture. Now, over the last 20 odd years in my life, a lot of what I have been doing is writing theme songs to radio programs or music specifically around certain issues around behavior and social change. The same thing would happen to me. I always use this as an example. One of the programs we did in Swahili for Kenya and Tanzania. We did in English for English Africa. We did in Portuguese. We did in Zulu for South Africa. But we also did it in French for French West Africa. Now, French West Africa is Mbalach all the way through, Benin, Cameroon. You've got a really big span there. So I had a challenge. I had to make a theme song, but I couldn't obviously use Mbalach. I obviously couldn't use the different styles as you go across French West Africa, specifically because other people in the targeted demographic would be left out. So that's the type of challenge that I've had to deal with, and that's why I've had to take a lot of my time to study and to learn about certain little elements about a demographic. Now, it could be as large as French West Africa, or it could be as small as the border between, one of the songs was the border between Mozambique, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, speaking about a specific issue. Now, how do you deal with that? So each one of those countries has got their own national musics. But that little region, it turns out that they share a traditional rhythm together, which I used in that specific case. So oftentimes it can be something big spanning many countries. Sometimes it can be literally a group of 100 little villages spanning colonial borders. So I think that my greatest passion in life has been this, because it does require a heck of a lot of research. 2 years ago, I was in Ivory Coast working with two young guys. I will try to leave a list of this music if you have any time. Otherwise, I'll leave you my contacts. Two young guys. They were both one of them was from Ivory Coast, one of them was from Burkina. So we get to, the guy from Ouaga comes down. But before we even started, 4 months before we even started, before I even had a contract, I started talking to them because they wanted to do the laptop, hip-hop, the same as every other kid does. And they were relatively unknown, but it was through an NGO that wanted to use them, as they were some of the youth spokespeople of the specific project around sexual rights and freedoms in specifically Burkina Faso. So we started talking at an early stage about, I started giving them little tests. I would send them everything from Michael Jackson to Salif Keita, to this and this, every stuff that they had never even heard of. I was sending them Franco. I was sending them all, slowly, and I would always ask them a question: what in this song makes it as famous as it is? What is it that? So by the time I got to the Ivory Coast, by the time I got to Abidjan and we met, we had a common language. Now, we had come up with, in that time, over 4 months, we had come up with 40 rhythms that we used as a short list. I had convinced them very slowly, because it was their decision. I was writing the music, but the rhythm and the lyrics were in their range, but obviously it had to fit. So we came up with a short list of 40. And of those 40s, we sat down one night, we had a bunch of beer, we got a man from the university to come and help us out, telling us some of the specifics around some of these rhythms. We had another guy from another good trumpet player, Elise. I'm sure Elise is going to see this. Hi, Elise. Come and join us. And we sat down, and from those 40, we hammered out 4, and we ended up using 2-2. And those songs went on to basically really increase the listens of these two young kids. So that's the kind of passion that I'm talking about when I talk about putting things together, making the left see what the right's doing. Well, guys, I'm out of time. I have a bunch more I would like to. Maybe I'll record more later and post it in the forum. Just wanted quickly to say that one of my other passions is Afro jazz. I believe that Afro jazz has gotten a bad rap. Afro jazz, I don't know about current day in Nigeria, but one of the things that I find when I play around Africa, and I've been on a lot of great stages with a lot of great musicians, which I'm very, very thankful for. But when Afro jazz comes up, it's always just a George Benson, 3 chords, so everybody kind of gets it, and that's sort of Afro jazz. And the term really upsets me. My next album's coming out very soon. I have spent many years in many different countries using African rhythms, African instruments, finding out ways to replay African instruments to get different notes, different sounds. It's really going to be something. So, yes, not just for commercial music. The reason why I'm speaking about all of this, but it's also on the level of jazz. I really believe that we have a lot that we could share that would make jazz if Africans started putting some of their ideas together to make African jazz, are you kidding me? Jazz would become a main listen. It wouldn't be the 12th genre of soul music. It would jump up to Beyonce's level. That's what I'm talking about. That's the possibilities that we have. Anyway, that's my time. That's it for me. God bless Africa. God bless every one of you. And I really hope that we get a few questions on the chat. That'd be great. Okay, cheers.